guys, welcome. So we're going to talk about the end of the war. Yesterday we talked about the Russian Revolution, which uh, kind of happens during World War One, and so we took time to kind of focus on that to kind of help set the tone for the interwar years, which are the years between World War One and World War Two, and help set the dynamic for World War Two. But today I'm going to finish up and talk about how the United States enters the war. So, and we're going to talk about the end of the war. So one thing I want to explain to you is the United States in both world wars, we like to practice neutrality or isolationism. So, isolationism means that we like to isolate, not be involved, or neutrality means that we don't want to be involved, like at all. Like Switzerland or Sweden during this time, they were neutral. So, we do things kind of. Not, I don't want to say it's underhanded, but we do assist Great Britain and other countries while they're fighting this war. So, like, we send weapons and things like that to Britain to help them fight the war, but we're just like, hey, you need to handle your business over there because we don't want to get involved. So, until 1917, we were not involved in the war physically. Like, we didn't have men in battle. We were kind of monitoring it. But we were neutral under Woodrow Wilson. And one thing I like to point out is Woodrow Wilson has WW as his initials, like WW. So I like to think Woodrow Wilson, I think World War One. And that's something that you can do to remember him because he's going to also come out with the 14 points, which are really important. So there will be a British passenger ship that has 1,200 people on it, and most of them are British, but there are 120 Americans. And the U-boats during this time are German U-boats. They're in the Atlantic Ocean, and what they do is they shoot and blow up ships and sink them. U-boats are submarines, okay? They're the early version of a submarine, and like I told you in our previous video, the Germans have very advanced technology during this time. So the German U-boat blows up the Lusitania. Lusitania sinks. Well, what's going to end up happening is that during this time we have a thing called not yellow journalism, but journalism, and so with newspapers are going to blow this situation up. They're going to talk about the Lusitania and American lives were lost, blah 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 blah. And as you know, with any situation in any country, Americans are going to feel very angry about these individuals dying in Lusitania. So the second thing, so that's the first strike against Germany. Okay, so we're sitting here looking at the Germans like, all right, you done messed up. Now the second thing that we're going to happen is that the Prime Minister of Germany is going to send a telegram to the president of Mexico during this time and ask him to start a war with the United States to distract them from getting into World War II. The president of Mexico is like, heck no, dude, that's crazy. Like, we're in alliance, we're near each other. And I think the Germans were trying to bank on the fact that in the 1800s, Mexico and the United States went back and forth over land and territory. We took land from the Mexicans. But the Mexican president is very intelligent. He's like, no, we're not going to start a war with our neighbors because we live right north of them. So the Zimmer Note, which gets released and exposed, and then Woodrow Wilson's like, you know what? We ain't got time for this. We got to get in this war. So 1917, the United States enters the war, and we bring two beneficial things to World War One. We have fresh recruits, which means we got a fresh squad of soldiers. Remember, this war started in 1914. So European soldiers, whether they're on the Allied side or the Central side, they're tired. The Germans are tired. The Austrian-Hungarians are tired. The French are tired. The British are tired. The Russians are like getting crushed. The Italians, everybody's tired in Europe. And so America's coming in, fresh soldiers. Excuse the door. My dog's just busted in here. I don't know what they're doing. Fresh soldiers, fresh recruits, and then they also have resources like we have tanks, we have guns, we have planes, we have all these things that we can come and help with this war. Anyway, so when you think about Woodrow Wilson, think about World War One. So U-boat here, Lusitania, and so here's what's going to happen. You know, Woodrow Wilson is going to be a president during this time that's going to create the 14 points. I'm not going to give you all 14 points, but I'm going to tell you about as we start to wind down the war, because once the United States gets involved, we're going to help win. And when I say win, I mean that means France, Britain, the United States. Russia had to get out of the war because it's a whole different situation. But so the losers will be Germany and Austria-Hungary, so that Allies win, the Central loses. We'll talk about that more. But anyway, Woodrow had 14 points. I'm not going to give you all 14, but I'm going to give you 4 summary points because these are the big things. And these are things that will carry on into the 20th century and will affect all different types of countries. The first thing Woodrow Wilson says is everybody needs to reduce their weapons because militarism is the reason that we got in the war. The second thing he will say is a country's people should choose their government. When you think about that, what type of government is he implying? Okay. Also, created the international organization called the League of Nations, which was to support peace. So that means everybody could be part of this league, and then they're going to support peace and they're going to work collaboratively to try to have peace before war escalates. Okay. But the leader of France during this time really wanted Germany to suffer because Germany brought a lot of pain and destruction to the French. So then we get the Treaty of Versailles. So you guys have known about treaties, you've learned about them throughout the year. Treaties mean peace, but this treaty is not necessarily going to be equitable, okay? And so when I say equitable, I mean like equal, okay? So the Treaty of Versailles is a peace treaty that brought World War I to an end. It's going to say the war is over. It's going to say we are going to stop killing each other and fighting and all this stuff, but it's not going to be a treaty that is going to maintain peace. And you may want to make a note of that, okay? Like, what is the flaw? It's not going to maintain peace. Also, there will have armistice, which armistice is an agreement made by opposing sides in a war to stop fighting for a certain time, and it's like a truce. For instance, Korea, North and South Korea have armistice right now. They've just decided not to stop shooting each other, and they decided like 50 years ago. So, here's a couple things. Here is what it includes. Germany must pay back their war reparations, admit full responsibility for the war. The German military will be limited in size. Germany must return land to France and Russia. Poland will be taken away from Germany and become its own country. Germany's colonies will be divided up by the Allied powers, which means they're going to take the colonies in Africa and Asia that belong to the Germans and give it to the United States, to Britain, to France, okay? Also, the word reparations is paying back those who have been done wrong. So, for instance, the British or French may get payment from the Germans because they said the Germans started the war. So, also, a couple other things. The League of Nations is established, but Germany is not allowed to participate. And then the United States Congress refuses to participate. And the United States Congress refuses to participate because there is no standing military in the League of Nations to protect or like enforce peace. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire are no longer going to be Austria-Hungary or the Ottoman Empire. They will be divided up. So Austria will be its own country. Hungary will be its own country. The Ottoman Empire, also areas of Hungary will become Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and then the Ottoman Empire will become Turkey. Britain is going to issue the Balfour Declaration, which means that the land of Palestine, which was an existing country, will be taken and it will be a place for the Jews, which means Palestinians and Jews will have to live together. The Jews will live there. If you know anything about Palestine, Palestinians are Muslim and Jews are Jewish, and so that is going to cause conflict, but we'll talk about that in the interwar years. Germany is extremely humiliated and its economy is decimated during this time, which means destroyed. So when we talk about World War I, if you look at this map in 1914, this is Europe before the war. This is Europe after the war. So when we look at like Austria-Hungary, and you have like Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Romania, Bulgaria, all these areas here, which is called the powder keg of Europe before the war, are going to change. This is also known as the Balkans. But now you have all these new countries and areas, which also means you have all these new identities, okay? And so I just want you to think about that. Also, Russia loses land because they had to give it up to Germany. So then you get Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Those countries still exist today. And then you have Finland as well. So there's a lot of geographical changes, which also means that it changes identities for people. Also, if you take a notice right here, Russia is no longer known as Russia. It's known as the United Soviet Socialist Republic, which means that the Soviet Union or Russia had converted to communism, and that's under Lenin and eventually Stalin. Okay. Cost of war, we had 8.5 million soldiers killed, 13 million civilians killed, 21 million wounded. Cost $332 billion at the time. Not sure what that would look like now. Probably mad expensive. So, couple things that are going to happen, and this is my last little points here. Europe's economy is going to decline because of the war, okay? The United States is going to emerge as a world power because we got in the war late. We're still really strong. And also, we are like rebuilding and doing all this stuff with people. Like, we're going to help rebuild Europe because we have the money to do it. And then Japan is going to rise as a superpower during this time because they have taken over lots of places in Asia, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then communism is going to rise in the Soviet Union, and there will be political instability in Europe due to the war. So there will be countries in Europe that will fall to communism and be satellite nations to the Soviet Union because they cannot maintain their government, so they fall to communism. All right, so that is all I got for today. That is the end of World War I.